Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my colleague, David Jeans, who's a senior writer covering tech here at Forbes. David, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Brittany.
I'm excited to talk to you. You just returned from Washington, D.C., where you watched President Joe Biden sign an executive order about AI. What can you tell us?
So it was a landmark event. There's been a lot of talk in recent months about what the federal government is going to do to regulate AI, especially since the start of the year. There was a huge hype around ChatGPT and the realization that AI is here. There's been, governments around the world are scrambling right now to come up with their own laws. We're seeing the EU is nearing its own efforts to introduce laws that will regulate AI, as are other countries. And the US, it's important to the US because the US wants to be seen as a leader here. It's not only a leader in innovation and attracting talent, but it also wants to be seen as a leader in regulating the space. So when President Joe Biden signed this executive order on Monday, this was the first step in that direction. And effectively the executive order is very wide-ranging. It has a series of measures that both set up some guardrails that they hope will have a flow-on effect across the industry to protect consumers, protect the public from the threats, some of the issues around AI. But it will also, they're also trying to seek and find ways to spur innovation in the sector. I think that the other thing that's important is that there is not yet legislation that has come in yet from the US to regulate AI, but this is seen largely as a step in that direction.
Like you said earlier, there was a really reckoning point when ChatGPT was introduced and it came super mainstream a little less than a year ago, and that was the realization AI was here. So before this, was AI more of the Wild West? Was there any regulation? What did that look like?
So it's pretty accurate to say that it has been a bit of a Wild West out there. There are of course major players right now that are pioneering AI research and AI products. You have Google, Microsoft, all sort of leading the way here, and you also have these more recent AI giants that have emerged. You have OpenAI, Anthropic. There's a whole range of them, like newly created powerhouses, really. But under that layer, there is also a massive, sprawling open source community on platforms like Hugging Face, where we do see that open source is a place where a lot of innovation happens, but it's also a place that it's by nature is open source. Therefore, it can attract players from across the spectrum.
President Biden said this when you were at the White House, quote, "I'm determined to do everything in my power to promote and demand responsible innovation." How do you balance, or how rather is he balancing regulation and innovation here specifically?
So in terms of spurring innovation, the one thing that they've talked a lot about is the fact that they're going to be streamlining the immigration process for people, for people who work in AI. That includes fast tracking green card applications. They're also launched a website, ai.gov, where they're going to also be advertising jobs within the federal government to focus on AI work. So that was sort of their one part of their innovation piece. When it comes to regulating and guardrails, there's a whole series of new requirements that they are introducing, especially as it pertains to working with the federal government. Major companies who produce AI products want to work with the federal government, and if they're going to do that, per this order, they're going to have a lot of their models tested, and they're going to have to go through a process known as red teaming, which means that threats are going to be detected early. There's going to be a lot of reporting around this, and there's going to be a lot of reporting around this, and the requirements are also increasing. However, the problem with an executive order without backing from legislation, there's some ways in which the government the White House is hamstrung here. They cannot direct other agencies to introduce regulations. They can only encourage them to do so. They've asked the FTC to ensure that it brings antitrust actions against companies to ensure that there's a competitive industry, but the White House doesn't have authority to direct it to do so. So that's one example.
You said earlier that the U.S. really wants to be a leader in this space, but they're a little hamstrung because there's no legislation. There's just that executive order. So in the international community, where is the U.S. in this AI space race, really? Is it ahead of the curve, or is it behind major international players?
I think it's a very tight horse race right now, and we're seeing a lot of sort of changing here because it appears that Europe may be the first bloc to introduce major legislation here. However, there's a summit this week in London of world leaders to talk about AI, and Vice President Kamala Harris attended that this week to talk about what the US is doing, and a huge part of that was talking about this executive order, and that was effectively how the White House talked about it. This was the first major AI regulatory effort by a government worldwide. So I think it's a bit too early to say, but there are different efforts being pursued right now, and time will tell.
I've been covering AI a lot over the past year. I know you have as a tech reporter, and I'm interested to talk about the pros and cons a little bit. A con obviously could be a threat to national security. Pro, spurs innovation, things like that. We're at a paradigm shift here. So do you think the benefits outweigh the risks when it comes to AI?
I think that the risks are pretty widely documented and well documented, and I think that we're coming up on some landmark events that will also test the limits of the ability to regulate AI and also the impacts of it. I mean, we've seen just from the conflict in Israel and Gaza that we've seen widespread misinformation being generated from that. We've also seen the rise of deepfake videos, and we've also seen harms to children and their interactions with AI generated products in social media. So I think that those things stand out as issues that need to be addressed as soon as possible. I think that also the introduction of ChatGPT has changed so many industries in less than a year. Like the marketing, like people are having their emails written by ChatGPT.
Journalists are also scared about their jobs.
And I mean, we've even seen AI take a major role within the Hollywood writers' strikes. There's huge concerns about whether AI is going to be replacing their jobs to write movies and TV shows. That feels right, and that feels very close and tangible and something that needs to be addressed.
Now let's talk about the political landscape a little bit. You were in DC earlier this week. Did you get the sense that there's bipartisan support to rein in AI, or is one party more gung-ho about it than the other?
It's being talked about as a largely bipartisan effort right now, and especially when I was speaking to White House advisors on Monday, it was clear that they saw that there was a lot of collaboration across both parties. So there is a number of task force set up. There's also there's an effort being led by Senator Chuck Schumer currently. I think that right now there seems to be unanimous agreement that this is a major issue that needs to be met with legislation.
And what about tech companies that you've talked to specifically? Are they welcoming this extra regulation, or are they more apprehensive towards more red tape in the industry?
So it was widely applauded by the majority of the tech industry. It seemed that there was a lot of input from the tech industry into, so the executive order actually built on a number of voluntary standards that 15 major tech companies had already signed on to. And so that showed some collaboration between the tech industry and the government. But I think that there were some concerns raised about just whether this executive order and any potential future legislation would unfairly advantage the incumbent and large tech players, as opposed to spurring innovation for smaller startups and ensuring they won't get either gobbled up or just be forced to go away if the larger companies sort of keep growing.
AI is still fairly new, as we know, but how would you describe, from your standpoint as a tech reporter, the moment that we're in right now when it comes to AI?
I mean, we're still in chapter 1. I think that we keep hearing about all these things that are coming in the pipeline and what this reimagined future looks like in 5 or 10 years. And everyone's always talking 5 or 10 years, like this is going to be the new reality. Like we're going to be watching movies that are entirely made by AI generated images and footage that have been, and scripts that have been written by AI. I mean,
do you think that this is how people were talking about the internet when the internet was first introduced? Do you think AI is on par with the internet?
Yeah, I mean, this is evidently the next major shift to in technology to affect humanity. I mean, it feels like it's already touching every part of our lives. And the fact that it's done so quickly just shows that it's so hard to predict what's to come, because the possibilities are endless.
David Jeans, thanks for coming in. I appreciate your reporting.
Thanks, Brittany.